Business of Architecture UK, episode 22. Hello and welcome to the Business of Architecture UK. I'm your host, Ryan Willard, and this week I had the fantastic opportunity to visit Marks Barfield Architects in southwest London and speak with co-founder Julia Barfield. In our conversation, Julia discusses how the practice began, how they managed to turn a losing competition idea into one of London's most defining city landmarks. She also goes on to talk about how they repeated this entrepreneurial approach in other cities, how her and her husband cultivated an extraordinary company culture. And she also gives a lot of pertinent and poignant advice to young architectural practices and the challenges they face when being committed to creating socially responsible architecture. So this interview was an absolute joy for me to conduct and speak with one of London's and the UK's architectural heroes. So please sit back, relax, and enjoy this conversation with Julia Barfield. Good afternoon and welcome. My name is Ryan Willard. I'm here with the Business of Architecture UK, and today I've got the privilege of speaking with Julia Barfield, the entrepreneurial architect who is responsible for some of London's most iconic landmarks, of course, the notable London Eye and the walkway at Kew Gardens, and more recently the Cambridge Mosque and the 360 Brighton. So welcome to the show, Julia.
Yes, thank you.
Pleasure to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
So, with such an inspiring list of projects and clients, what is your key to success, or how would you define a successful practice?
Well, my definition of success, a successful architectural practice, is really, it starts with the quality of the projects themselves. It starts with the quality of the architecture. Because I think as architecture, we have the privilege of affecting people's lives, whether it's where they live, whether they work, where they play, where they learn. And, you know, that experience can be a good one, an uplifting one, or not. And, you know, we also obviously have a responsibility to use as little of the Earth's limited resources as we can. Yeah. So I would start there. I'd start with the quality of the projects. And then I think, you know, we move to the kind of people, your employees. You know, that's the kind of second most important thing, is to have a practice of people who are engaged, creative, valued, and part of the team. And I think that's how you're able to then develop, you know, because in my view, it's not me who comes up with the good ideas, or even David. It's us as a team, and we sort of are the ones that determine what are the good ideas and what are the not good ideas. And so we're keen to bring out the best in everyone.
And how did you begin then? How did the practice begin? How did you start? What were the first kind of projects that you had, and how did you grow it into this?
Yes, well, I was working at Foster's. David was working at Rogers, and he actually left Rogers because he'd been working on the Lloyd's building, and the Lloyd's building finished. And I think at that point, you know, he decided that he wanted to come out on his own, and after 18 months, I joined him. In fact, the funny thing was that you know, he kind of persuaded me to give in my notice at Foster's, and then the day after I'd given in my notice, all of the jobs that he had lined up just disappeared. Right. So, I mean, you know, so I left about 3 months later, and we built it from there. And
were you together then?
Yes. No, we met at the AA. And,
I see. Okay.
And yes, and we got married. I mean, Richard and Ruthie came to our wedding. Right. Yes. So we were together a long time.
And it's quite interesting actually. There's that. You know, both you worked at Foster's and he was at Rogers, that these two practices seem to have generated so many of the UK's architectural, you know, companies that exist there.
Yes, they have indeed. I mean, and again, I think it comes down to the quality of the architecture that they did. You know, attracted presumably good people, and then they went on to do good things.
And so, what were your first projects? The ones that how did you get started?
Here. Well,
as your partnership.
Yes, as our partnership. Well, I mean, we were very lucky. We actually won a big competition quite early on. So we won a competition for something called the Thames Valley Park, and it was against some venerable competition, and it was a 30 to 35 million pound project. And it was on the basis of that we left our office in the side of our house, because we started off as you do in the extension on the side of the house. And but once we won this big competition, we then were asked actually by the developer to get a proper office, and so we did. We actually bought this place.
Right. Okay.
And then about 6 months later, it was the recession of the early 90s.
Okay.
So the job disappeared, and by that time we had 2 kids, and our overheads had gone up 10 times. So
Did you have a number of staff as well at that time?
we had a few staff, not very many, but we had to go down to just David and me, and our accountant come everything,
Yeah.
who was helping us. So, and then we started just renting out this place, to dressmakers and other architects and whoever really would come and rent out. And then, of course, we needed something to cheer us up. So that's when we saw the competition for the landmark for the millennium.
Right.
And that's how we had a bit of time on our hands. I mean, as I say, we needed something to cheer us up. So we went in for the competition for the millennium and came up with the London Eye. And, that obviously started a whole new chapter in our lives.
Yes.
So sometimes from bad things, good things can come.
So can you tell me a little bit about that London Eye competition? Because I understand that you weren't actually the competition winners.
No, we weren't the winners. In fact, it was organised by the Sunday Times and the Architecture Foundation.
Right.
And really it called for ideas how to celebrate the millennium.
Yeah.
We kind of thought about it and thought, it was asking for a landmark, actually. But then after thinking about it, we thought, well, actually, it shouldn't really be a landmark that you just look at. It should be something that's celebratory, that you participate in. Mm. And so then that led to kind of thinking about, something that people go on, I suppose. And then David came up with the idea of the wheel. I then kind of came up with the idea about where it should go. There on the South Bank. Right,
okay. So there wasn't a defined site as such, or?
No, there wasn't a defined site. It was just ideas,
okay.
A landmark for the millennium. So this is 1993 we're talking about now.
Yeah.
But the judges, in their wisdom, didn't think any of that ideas were good enough. I don't know, it was a kind of special time, I suppose. And as I say, we did have a bit of time on our hands. We decided to pursue it. David's father had been entrepreneurial.
Okay.
And we'd worked with him on something called the World Sea Centre in Marseille previously, and I suppose it was a sort of natural progression that we started a company called the Millennium Wheel Company.
Right.
And then sort of started, and then we put in a planning application. And you can put in a planning application on land you don't own. You do have to tell the people who own the land. It's only polite.
Yeah.
So we did that.
And who were the owners of the land at the time?
The owners of the land were Shriyama, who owned the county hall at the time, and South Bank Centre. So, we gave them notice, put in a planning application, and then it came to the attention of Mirabar Hillel, the journalist in the Evening Standard, who deals with kind of planning applications.
Right.
And I always imagine her going down the list of planning applications, for the extension to, 33 wood lane.
Big wheel, Ferris wheel.
500-foot wheel. Now, what's that? So then she came to see us. She, was very curious. We told her all about it. And she liked the idea. And then she took it to her editor, who also liked the idea. And then he decided that, because they still are a campaigning newspaper. They're there to kind of promote London, to, come up. So, he ran a Back the Wheel campaign, and he kind of invited, the great and the good to make comments about it. And I think he only printed the ones that were positive.
Yeah,
obviously.
that's always good.
And then from that, it sort of started to snowball. And we were very lucky at the time. We got to know Alan Davidson, and kind of CGIs were just becoming, were in their infancy.
Okay.
And, that this intrigued us as a way to really show what it would be like. And so we worked with Alan Davidson to do some of the first images of the wheel in place, the kind of view from Buckingham Palace, the view from St James's Park, the view from, everywhere. And then, as people started talking about what are we going to do for the millennium, somehow people kind of got to know that we were doing this. And then, if they were doing an article about it, we had good images.
Yeah.
So they used those, and it came to the attention of Bob Ayling, who was running British Airways. And then he was curious and got involved. And we went to see him. He offered to take 50% of our company.
So this is the Millennium Group?
This is the Millennium Wheel Company.
Yeah, the Millennium Wheel Company.
So he bought 50% of the company and basically gave £600,000 in order to get the planning permission.
Right.
So with that money, we then built a rather large model that you've seen. And we went to see everyone and anyone who would listen to us to talk about the project, from the Royal Fine Art Commission to, local community groups. We consulted all the councils in London, the London Society, anybody, all of the kind of local and London-wide groups. And we just went to see them personally and told them about the project. Mostly it was positive. The Royal Fine Art Commission was a notable one that wasn't.
Really?
The Lord Fawsley hated the project. We went to present, because we'd already presented at the Royal Fine Art and got a very good result on another project. And so we went and presented, but Lord Fawsley really, really didn't like the project, and actually he wouldn't really allow us to speak. He was not happy. Anyway.
And what were you presenting? You had these CGI images. This is all during the planning process itself? Or?
Yes, so from sort of 1994 to when it finally got permission in 96.
And were you being able to pay yourselves whilst this project was being developed?
Well, the 600,000 was helpful, very helpful. We were doing other projects by then, other competition, quite a lot of competitions. I can't remember all the projects that we did. We were building a water sports centre in Liverpool,
right,
which was a lovely project to do. So we were kind of carrying on the practice at the same time as doing this. But we're very small. We were only, 8 or 9 time. We grew to be 8 or 9, I suppose.
Got it. And so I understand you were also partly on the client side then of the development of the wheel itself. So we owned
the company.
50%.
Yeah. So we were client and architect.
And how was that relationship? How does that differ? What was that?
Well, we were just intimately involved in all aspects, I suppose, and could see it from both sides.
What were the biggest obstacles for you being on the client side that are different from when you're just being employed to do architectural services?
Well, I think with the London Eye it was actually an advantage because there was one notable time when we'd got planning permission. We'd gone out to tender for a turnkey contract, fixed price contract, and Mitsubishi won it, and they had convinced everyone that they could do it for 10 million less than anybody else.
Yeah.
And at one point they kind of came back and said that they just wanted to modify the design of the capsules. So the design of the capsules that they wanted to modify it to were hanging capsules that were, basically looked like any kind of a Ferris wheel capsules. So that at that point, Dave and I said, no, this is not what we got planning permission for. But our partners at that time were keen to carry on. So the fact that we were able to say no was hard, because we could have actually killed the project altogether.
Yeah.
And in fact we did for about 24 hours. But we couldn't have done anything else. I mean, we and they would have been a laughingstock. So it was quite handy being able to do that, because otherwise I suppose we might have been in a position where we couldn't have.
Yeah, you had an extra sort of bit of leverage.
Yes, extra bit of leverage. I suppose we could have walked away, but they might have got someone else to do it. I don't know. Who knows? Anyway.
And so what's your relationship now with the London Eye? Are you still part owners of
No,
that company?
No, we're not. No. No, we were bought out in 2006, I think, something like that.
By BA?
By BA and Two-Thirds.
Right.
Because by that time it was a three-way split.
Right.
Two-Thirds had come on board too as the operators.
Got it.
Yeah.
And you've got a similar, am I right in saying, a similar sort of relationship you're on the developer side on 360 Brighton.
Brighton,
as well.
yes. It's actually the British Airways I360. Yes, we did the development, but we actually own 80% of that.
Right.
So.
And how did that project come about?
Well, that came about because after the London Eye, we got approached by many different people wanting to replicate the success of the London Eye. From different cities around the world. And we kind of quickly worked out that there are very few cities like London who can actually support a project of that scale. It has, 4.5 million visitors a year, paying visitors. It costs £80 million in, to 1999, 1998. So actually to replicate that somewhere else would be a lot more today, and you need the visitor numbers in order to support it. So we decided to sort of keep hold of the experience of that slowly unfolding view where you go high in a city, or and redesign how you deliver it.
Yeah.
So that's what, but for a lower price, that would be more replicable in different places. So that's how the i360 came aboard. And David went to see the chief executive of Brighton, and he was very receptive and took him on a tour around looking at various sites, and they passed the site of the West Pier, and it was just such a kind of marriage made in heaven. It was perfect.
Amazing.
Yeah, it was, because then, the idea for the vertical tower with the single pod taking you up was like a vertical pier. It was like, and the West Pier had burnt down only a year before, so this was like Phoenix from the flames. It was
nice. Yeah,
yes,
nice metaphor
was,
there.
Yeah, it was a kind of perfect match, really.
And what advice, you say when you were starting out you were doing lots of competitions, and it's quite interesting for other architecture practices now. I mean, what advice would you give for young architects who are wanting to do kind of entrepreneurial ventures like this, or entering, because competitions can be so financially draining. And
absolutely. They are,
and
absolutely.
it becomes more and more, look at the Helsinki project, which nothing's happening to it. The amount of resource that goes into something like that.
Well, sometimes, as in this case, a competition that you don't win can actually, if you do take it forward, it can actually come to something. But I think the Millennium was a special time, so I'm not saying to young architects, just go out there and do it. You've got to, because we were very lucky, I think, and, we did a back-of-the-envelope business plan, and it seemed to stack up. One of the things that we were very careful about was not to go for public money, because we thought that would be too demanding.
Right.
And I think that was the case. But the fact that the business plan was so unassailable.
What kind of things did you have in that? How did you make it robust?
Well, it was robust. I tell you, it was a back of an envelope. But the fact is, it worked. Yeah. On the back of an envelope, really, really worked. So I would just say to any young person who's wanting to be entrepreneurial is to just, I don't think you can, if it doesn't work on the back of an envelope, really, really work well, then don't go for it.
Yes.
It has to be really robust.
Yeah, it's got to make sense. It's interesting. I was talking to Chris Roman Lee of Studio Octopi and what they've been doing with the Thames baths, and they're going through that sort of initial seed investment to find, and it's a socially conscious, entrepreneurial, community-based effort, and again, kind of, you know, how they're putting together their business plan to make sure that this stacks up. And again, I do think that of a lot of architects, if we all kind of get fluent in the numbers, it makes it much more powerful to make these kinds of
absolutely
assertions.
It's absolutely essential. But you know, one of the things that we were most proud about the London Eye is that when we got permanent permission in 2005,
because it was only a temporary structure.
It was only a temporary permission initially. When we got the full permission, we made sure that as part of the Section 106, 1% of ticket sales go to the local community in perpetuity. And that's been quite a lot of money over the last 18 years.
Yeah, 4 million people a year.
Well, not 18 years, about 15 years. So, you know, it is good when you can do a project that does give back in a meaningful way.
Yes. Yeah, and this is something that so many architects are very passionate about nowadays.
Absolutely.
Is to be able to do something which is community driven.
Yes, absolutely. No, it's really good that, you know, we help pay for the new landscaping on Jubilee Gardens. We help pay for the maintenance. We've helped pay for, and a number of community projects around in the Waterloo area, you know, are funded from the London Eye, and so it should be, you know. So it should be.
And your kind of other projects that you've got in the office, are they? Do you have any other kind of entrepreneurial driven projects, or is that spirit kind of inbuilt into everything you do, or is it?
Well, not everything. We do have, you know, sort of normal project. You know, we're doing a mosque in Cambridge, for example.
Yeah,
we're doing
the beautiful timber.
Yes, which is, you know, it's a wonderful project, and we're doing a mixed-use project in Camden, which is also very exciting. I mean, one that sort of has some parallels is I'm involved and have been. In fact, Dave and I were involved when we were students at the AA in our local park. So we've lived in the same house for 40-something years, and we were involved in the local park, actually forming the park, because it wasn't a park when we first moved in. It was designated as a park in the Abercrombie plan, but hadn't been made into a park. It was just surrounded by corrugated iron, and it was a kind of derelict piece of land. And we were very much part of a local group that, you know, said, let's get on with it. We got some money from central government to do that. Anyway, sort of, we didn't do anything for quite a few years, and then recently got involved because funding for parks is just slashed to the bone. And we've made a proposal together with our neighbour, who's the chair of the Friends of Larkhill Park, and we're obviously friends of Larkhill Park. In fact, before we were, it was the Larkhill Park Action Group in the 80s. Now it's the Friends of, which is quite nice. It's quite a nice kind of turnaround. So us, together with the chair of the Friends, have put together a proposal to develop 3 sites that just happen to be adjacent to the site, owned by the council, local council, and we're proposing that they are developed, and then the profit from the development goes to the maintenance of the park.
Right. Okay.
So this is a kind of idea that we're trying to promote at the moment, you know, it's a bit of a challenge because, you know, ultimately these sites are owned by the local authority, so they're sort of in charge. But, you know, we've been trying to grapple with ways that we could do it with a trust or something like the Coin Street Community Builders, you know. I mean, they obviously had the big advantage. They were given the land. Well, they weren't given the land. They were sold the land by the GLC, by Ken Livingston. But, you know, we've been trying to grapple with, you know, maybe there is a kind of way that you could develop it with a not-for-profit. Because the problem is, if you, at the moment, the route that the local council is going down is just to a normal developer. Obviously, a normal developer is going to take their 15-20% profit. Yeah. And that profit is something that could go to the park. You know, so we're kind of grappling with it at the moment. But I mean, I think that's where, we as architects can actually, having that knowledge can actually make a difference. Because, austerity is appalling, and there are so many ways I think that we have to think really creatively in how to combat it. Apart from, of course, ideologically changing the root of it, but that's another matter.
Yeah, and it's interesting, how to make these kind of financial arguments so that something else can be done. Like, how do you argue financially for a park, or
Quite.
I think something like Battersea Power Station, for example. I've heard lots of people talk about, well, what if that had been developed into a park or some sort of public space? It could be absolutely incredible. But then,
it does have a park right next door, but that park is at capacity.
Yeah.
So I'm.
Yeah, and it's like how. Yeah.
Yeah. There was supposed to be a park with in the Nine Elms. The Vauxhall Nine Elms development was meant to have a linear park running all the way through it.
Right.
I've yet to see it.
And it will get squeezed, yeah.
I think it might end up being a linear path, but I don't know. I reserve judgments until it's finished.
Yes.
But it was meant to have a park because, Battersea Park is at capacity. You see, our park is actually very close to that one. And there were these green fingers that went up from Nine Elms to our park, because our park has a football pitch.
Right.
Whereas this linear park didn't. Obviously there's sports facilities in Battersea, but there is a point where all parks get to capacity because of the numbers of people. And obviously the Nine Elms development is, I think it's 40,000 new residents. So, the facilities have got to be there, have got to come with these developments. You can't just expect...
Who are your sort of key allies when you're kind of campaigning for these kinds of projects? Or how do you win over developers? How do you...
Well, we haven't. We've in the Larkhall one. We've won over a local councillor who is terrific and is a real champion. But we've yet to find a developer. Got distracted with so many other things because obviously this is extra on top of everything else. On top of Marks Barfield, Brighton I360. I would love to hear from a developer who was willing to do something creatively in this respect, because I think, what we did with the London Eye, and we were able to give that 1%, in perpetuity. So it's, what councils need is not only capital but revenue.
Yeah,
to actually
cash flowing
to maintain, the kind of services and the facilities that they have. So I think we all need to think creatively on how to do this. Yeah, because it's not about the money really.
Yes,
at the end of the day, it obviously has to be. It has to work financially, but
Yeah, it's the value of the city.
Yes,
and that quality of life is kind of
absolutely
difficult. That's always the architectural conundrum: is how do we quantify monetarily the quality of good space?
Yeah.
How can you argue how important it is to civic life to have good operating public space?
Yeah. Well, where I've lived for 40 years, it's in Stockwell, and that there's a high proportion of council estates all around. 4 out of 5 residents don't have any open, their own private space. So parks are really, really important. That kind of common ground is really, really important.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
So moving on a little bit, talking about the culture of your office and your studio. What are the sort of keys that you have to cultivating? And I understand there's a lot of people here that stay for quite a long time.
Hopefully.
How do you cultivate that company culture? What are your key ingredients?
Well, I think valuing everybody. Including everybody in, everyone who's working on a project has the opportunity to put forward ideas. And as I was saying earlier, it's, not all ideas come from the top. It's important that, allow ideas to come from, good ideas to come from wherever they come from. And, I see my role as being the arbiter of just determining what is a good idea and what's not such a good idea.
Yeah.
And giving a kind of design consistency. But otherwise, I encourage everyone to participate and And it comes back to the quality of the projects. Because everybody. I mean, I remember when I was working at Foster's. Everyone was very proud to be there, because you knew that you were creating good work, and that's what that's what's important.
Yeah, and that's often an overlooked kind of thing that actually is so important, that people will go that extra mile when they know that they're working on something unique
doing something
and special.
worthwhile, something that's good.
And how do you kind of, what happens when you take on a project that's like, well, maybe this one isn't, this isn't a good project, or does that ever happen?
Yes, that has happened. Obviously, practice is a roller coaster. I mean, I can tell you, we've had our ups and we've had our downs, and it continues to be challenging in terms of, particularly a practice of our size, being profitable is a challenge. And I suppose as you get older, you get to kind of nose out the ones that maybe aren't such a good thing to be involved with. But at the moment, we're very lucky. We have some wonderful clients and repeat clients, which is something that we had struggled with, because a lot of our projects were sort of one-off. We had, people that were doing something for the first time, and we'd leap on board and try and do something very special. And but it's always good to have repeat clients as well. It's one piece of advice I can give, but we've learnt far too late. But yes.
Well, that's obviously that's one of the kind of continual struggles of young architectural practices. Is particularly if it's easy to go into the domestic arena, but it's unlikely that somebody's going to be doing their house again and again and again.
Yes.
Unless they're, some people do, so they buy multiple houses.
But
the repeat clients in architecture are
it's difficult because competitions are sometimes the only way you can break into different markets, but they are challenging, and I think people should be very selective about which ones they go in for.
Yes. What would you kind of encourage people to? What kind of criteria would you encourage young practices to look at in terms of how to select if a competition is going to be worthwhile entering or not?
I think it's. I think they should select competitions that are well run. So, check out who's actually running it, and because I think there's people like Malcolm Redding and Caroline Cole now run competitions very well. I think the IRB have done in the past also, but I think you need to check that out. And it's just making sure that. Because most people who run competitions well will make sure that there's an honorarium.
So you get a mention at least, kind of.
Well, some money, So once you get to the, so there may be a first phase where you just give, your past experience, which I know with young architects is often hard. But once you're in the shortlist, you should have an honorarium. You should be paid for your, at least to print the boards and things like that. So I would encourage people just to stick to those. Where you're getting something back, some of your costs. Yeah,
because when you kind of look at it in the terms of figures of how much it costs to enter a competition,
it's huge.
And then you might not be able to negotiate your fees even if you do win the competition.
Yeah. It's.
And have some sort of marketing plan afterwards, because often I think with competitions you might, if that you do all this work and then nobody sees it.
Yes.
It kind of gets kept somewhere. That's it's a risk.
You need to make sure that you've got the ability to show it. Yeah, absolutely.
And I want to talk about what was it that made you and David such a successful partnership running a company?
I don't know. We grew up together, I suppose, professionally.
Yeah.
So I suppose we came from, similar backgrounds, I suppose, in terms of our ethos and beliefs, and we worked, being at Richard and Norman's practices, that's a kind of similar approach to architecture.
And you had complementary skill sets, or just
I think so. Yes,
same shared vision.
Yes, and shared vision. Yeah.
Brilliant. I've got some questions here from some of our listeners.
Yes.
And Anna Charbel, who is I think she's the head of the Women in Architecture group. She asked, how would you tackle that there are more women in architecture?
Well, I think we all have to tackle it in many different... I mean, I've always... David and I mean, we never really went specifically and said we want 50-50 men and women in the practice, but we always did.
Yes.
It wasn't hard. It really wasn't hard. So I think there's no excuse for people not to have, 50-50 men and women. I mean, it's changing from the bottom up. Clearly, when I was at the AA, it was 1 in 7 women to men. Now it's 50-50, virtually wherever you go in architecture schools. So, it will change. I'm involved in a group called Equilibrium, which Caroline Cole started, which is a group of senior women from around the construction industry. So it's actually not just architects, but engineers and project managers and, people from all aspects of the construction industry and academics. And we are concentrating on looking at ways to prevent attrition. The attrition of, because that's one of the problems, of course, is that they start and then kind of fall away as children come into the scene. I mean, we make sure in our practice that we have very family-friendly policies. Got a lot of people working part-time, which is challenging, but, it's the right thing to do, so you do it.
Long periods of maternity leave and...
Yes, much longer than I ever had, but there you go. We're also putting together a kind of manifesto or, advice to practices as to how they can, improve. Practices do want to improve, how they can improve. I think shining a light is also very helpful. I mean, I think this recent survey on, where companies have to declare the gender pay gap is very useful. Because before it was hidden, and so now it's
kind of there for everyone to see.
It's there for everyone to see, and I suppose it's a kind of naming and shaming, but if that's what needs to happen, that is what should happen. Because as I say, in my experience, it's really not hard to have. I mean, I suppose in our case, because we were run by a man and a woman, that maybe we attracted, such. But there really is no excuse not to have.
Why do you think
equal
many architecture practices do become kind of out of kilter, out of balance?
I think it's a very human thing that people often hire people in their own image. I think that's I'm not. That's not an excuse. It's just I think that's maybe one of the reasons. But I think also people do need to go outside their comfort zone and actually be more open to talent that's maybe not in their image, because it's undoubtedly talent, even though so being able to recognise it, whatever the gender or
how do you recognise talent?
I suppose in an interview with somebody, you just you need to look at the work they've done and see whether there's a spark there and whether they have an understanding of what of the design process as a process, and not being just that the first idea that pops into your head. It comes out of a true understanding of brief, site, all of those, the place, all of those things, I think there's fairly fundamentals there.
And how do you kind of make sure you're selecting the right kind of people for your company culture or that kind of...
Yes, I mean, I suppose you after a while you just can tell whether they will fit in or not. Occasionally we've been wrong, which is not easy.
Yeah.
But, you do need to, having a good and happy team is absolutely key.
Totally. Definitely.
Absolutely key, yeah.
So what's next for Marks Barfield?
Well, I've got. I'm very happy with this mosque in Cambridge. I think it's a very nice project.
Is it completed now?
No, it's due to be completed in the beginning of next year.
Okay.
And I've actually become very excited by the workplace.
Right.
I never thought I would say that, but I think the new thinking in the workplace is really exciting. You know, the whole well-being agenda, whole biophilic agenda, and you know, people spend a long time at work. You know, I don't remember the figures about, you know, but a large portion of their life is actually spent at work. So we as architects have a responsibility to make it as good as it can be.
Yes.
You know, a place where they want to go, not that they have to go. So, you know, I've got quite interested in that. I think that's quite an exciting area to move into.
And so these new projects that you're looking to acquire?
Well, we've got a project that we've got planning permission for in Camden, which is for a large mixed-use development, where we're trying to introduce some of these ideas. And we've got another project in Westminster where we're trying to do the same.
So that's quite interesting.
It's very exciting.
That's quite interesting. How did you find moving into new sectors?
Well, we've never allowed ourselves to be defined as doing only a few sectors. I mean, it's most invigorating actually moving into new, you know, doing lots of different things as opposed to doing the same thing all the time. I think that's how we keep our ideas fresh. And you know, there's often possibilities of moving, you know, thinking and ideas from one sector to another, for example, which is an opportunity to kind of renew your thinking on one.
Because it's always, from an architect's perspective, like we love to do lots of different projects.
We do, yes.
And you can see, you know, I've been in meetings before where we're doing terminals at airports, and somebody's used a kitchen layout idea from a small extension, and you know, and solved something quite massive. And for us, it makes sense. But from a client perspective, and from a marketing perspective, being a generalist is like
it's challenging.
It's a no-no. And obviously, from a client's perspective, and particularly nowadays, people will get more and more rigorous in terms of they want to see 5 years experience, or they want to see, you know, that you've delivered X, Y, and Z.
PQQs, where you've got to have done 3 of those in the last 3 years. I mean, you know, we find that very challenging. But you know, we recently completed the primary school for Cambridge University, their first university training school, and that actually was a competition where we went in and with a fresh approach. And even though we'd done quite a few schools before, you know, it was this was a competition actually organised by Caroline Cole, and she actually was looking for a fresh approach. So I suppose it's trying to find those opportunities, those competitions where people are, because I think clients do also, you know, there are clients who want, you know, 3 of the, you know, in the last 3 years, but there's also other clients who do want to move things forward and have fresh ideas and want innovation. And, you know, it's kind of nosing those ones out.
Yes. And how do you do that?
Better out. I don't know.
How do you find the clients who want innovation?
I don't know. I think you've just got to keep your eyes and ears open.
Have you ever had a kind of sort of a marketing strategy or anything like that, or in your own sort of business plans, or do you strategize about how, you know, what we want to meet this person, or there are key figures?
Yes, absolutely. You do have to have marketing strategies. I mean, we regularly meet and actually. Caroline Cole's been very, you know, she gives architects advice on their business development, marketing, client development, and you know, she's been very helpful in the past. But I think you've got to strategize about how you're going to approach new sectors, new clients all the time. You've got to refresh the way you're presenting yourself, and you know, make sure you've got the projects there to use to be able to show that you can that you're enjoyable people to work with.
Could you give us an example of when you've kind of formulated a strategy successfully?
I don't know if I can think of, well, for the school, for example, you know, instead of asking, you know, people to come up with just, you know, a presentation about other schools that you've done, what the questions were asked more generally, more kind of philosophically about what constitutes good architecture from the point of view of the passerby.
Right, okay.
And then what constitutes good architecture from the point of view of the user. And I found that really interesting. And, so it was that kind of gave an opportunity to think, from about it from scratch. And
first principles.
First principles. And that was, we got the project because we did do that. And we didn't do a presentation, we didn't pick out a presentation that we'd done before and tweak it. We started from scratch. And I think, I think sometimes you've got to do that.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Julia.
Okay.
It's been absolutely wonderful speaking with you. Absolute wealth of very inspiring wisdom there. So thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Viewers, I shall look forward to speaking to you next time. So that is a wrap. Thank you for listening. The views expressed on this show by my guests do not represent those of the host, and I make no representation, promise, guarantee, pledge, warranty, contract bond, or commitment, except to help you be unstoppable.